So let's go through very quickly what's happening with this Donald Trump Jr. thing. He put out emails. We were talking about this yesterday. Basically, he got this email from this guy saying the Crown Prosecutor of Russia, and they're colluding. And the whole thing, to be honest with you, the whole thing, it wouldn't surprise me if the whole thing was a setup, if the whole thing was meant to look bad, because who benefits from all this? Who benefits from all these charges and counter-charges and all this stuff? It's basically the Russians are dining out on this. Do you think that if we just forgot about this, would they be happier? No, they're happier that we're all at each other's throats about this. So Donald Trump Jr. went to this meeting, nothing happened. The woman brought up some completely other subjects, this Magnitsky Act or something, and he walked out, and Jared Kushner walked out after 10 minutes, and Paul, what's his name, Manafort was there and was on his phone the whole time. So here's Donald Trump Jr. last night on the Hannity show acknowledging that this was kind of a silly thing to do.
In retrospect, I probably would have done things a little differently. Again, this is before the Russia mania. This is before they were building it up in the press. For me, this was opposition research. They had something, maybe concrete evidence to all the stories I'd been hearing about, but they were probably underreported for, years, not just during the campaign. So I think I wanted to hear it out, but really it went nowhere, and it was apparent that that wasn't what the meeting was actually about.
Okay, let me ask a hypothetical, and I know hypotheticals, maybe you've thought about it since this has now become Russia collusion, and et cetera. Did you ever meet with any other person from Russia that you know?
You know what, I don't even know. I've probably met with other people from Russia,
but
certainly not in the context of a formalized meeting or anything like that, because why would I? In the grand scheme of things, how busy we were, it was much more important to doing this. This was a courtesy to an acquaintance.
Now, I don't want to say, so that, he made a dopey move. He went to this meeting. He shouldn't have gone to the meeting. There's questions about whether I can't see any illegality here or anything like that. And remember, all of this is wrapped in this fantasy narrative that Putin and Trump were somehow colluding to destroy the electoral system. That's the fantasy narrative, that it's all wrapped in. You take that fantasy away, and it's just a bunch of different things that happened, some of which were dumb, some of which, Remember the Democrat donors to Hillary Clinton paid an operative to get disinformation from Russia. Remember that whole thing about Trump and prostitutes in the hotel, which then went to Comey, and Comey used that to start an investigation. And Comey himself has been leaking information that we now think was classified information. His memos are supposed to have contained classified information. So these guys are completely blowing this. The Democrats are completely blowing this flow of information. But let's not think that for one moment that the Democrats are going to overreact to this information about Donald Trump Jr. Here's their reaction. That was Chuck Schumer, I guess. But let's listen to Tim Kaine.
Nothing is proven yet, but we're now beyond obstruction of justice in terms of what's being investigated. This is moving into perjury, false statements, and even into potentially treason.
It's treason! It's treason! He had a meeting with her. It's treason! Here is Jonathan Turley, who is a lefty law professor, responding. He's a left-winger. He has some libertarian leanings. He's from George Washington University. Here he is responding to this on Fox.
It's like we have this giant Rorschach test where everyone sees ink blots and sees crimes everywhere. I mean, the criminal code has defined elements to it. You just don't find these ambiguous crimes. Some people have said this could be treason. For the love of God, treason is defined in the Constitution. This is not treason. Other people have said this could be a Logan Act violation. Well, Logan Act has been used once in 200 years and is facially unconstitutional. One said, well, if you take things of tangible value under the campaign laws and treat information like that, then maybe you have a campaign contribution violation. Well, yeah, but we haven't seen that done. You could also treat it like a panda and say it's an endangered species violation. But courts haven't done that. So I think that people need to take a breath. This was a meeting where someone said they had evidence of a possible crime by the opponent of the Trump campaign. They met with this person. I think a lot of people in the city view that as naive. I think a lot of people say, my God, why didn't you use a surrogate, which is how it's done in Washington? But that itself is not a crime.
So why are they overreacting? They're overreacting because they got nothing. If they didn't have nothing, they would go forward, proceed in a judicious, stately way to gather evidence, but they know the story, the surrounding narrative that is giving this story a sense of importance. The surrounding narrative is garbage. So the surrounding narrative doesn't exist. The whole Trump, and Boris Badenoff and Natasha spy story is all nonsense. So they have to, they gin up this hysteria. Now, let me show you how they do this. Before I do, though, I just want to play Ted Cruz, because Ted Cruz made the essential point that the Trump administration's substantial policy orientation toward Russia has not been pleasant for Vladimir Putin. So everything else they're talking about, any stupid remarks Trump made, and he made a few stupid remarks about Russia and Putin being a strong leader and all this stuff, any stupid remarks he made had nothing to do with the actual policies of the administration. So here's Ted Cruz explaining that.
If you look at what happened with Russia, Russia invades Ukraine, and the Obama administration does nothing, is utterly ineffectual. You have John Kerry saying he desperately wants to provide Putin with an off-ramp.
President Trump is trying to water down a sanctions bill that you voted for.
Putin didn't want an off-ramp. And the policies of the Obama administration were constant weakness and appeasement. One of the best things recently announced was the Trump administration's intention to go forward with placing anti-ballistic missile batteries in Poland and the Czech Republic. Those were scheduled to go in 10 years ago. And in 2009, in the opening weeks of the Obama administration, Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton canceled the anti-ballistic missile batteries in Poland and the Czech Republic. Why? Because they wanted to appease Putin. They wanted to appease Russia, and Russia didn't want those batteries to go in. I'm glad that the Trump administration is returning to a common sense defense of our allies against our adversaries. And substance matters, policy matters.
You wouldn't know it by listening to the press who were reporting. I think they reported something like 52% of the evening news was about this meeting that Donald Trump Jr. had. I think I've got that right. Maybe it's 56%, maybe it's even more. It was some enormous number. 52, 56, well, I can't find it right now, but it was over 50%, 54%, sorry, right between the two. 54% of the evening coverage was about this. I mean, that is an amazing, amazing stat. But I want